Hello and welcome to Culture Chat. My name is Dr. Marquita Byrd and my co-host is
Professor Arjun Buxi.
If you haven't been with us before, we are hosting a series of discussions about cultural issues in the United States with the hopes of stimulating discussion in the community and among our peers. Today, we're talking about disability. And we're talking about disability because it's part of the diversity landscape, a topic that a lot of people don't mention when they talk about diversity. I'm interested in it because I am a parent of a disabled child and have become very immersed in the issues that surround living as a disabled person in the United States and also living as a caregiver and the issues that occur. One of the things that we find out when we do research on diversity is that there's a lack of inclusion of the topic in politics. We don't hear any political candidates including it as part of their platform. Neither party is including it as part of their platform. Furthermore, among think tanks that generate research data and policy, they're not including disability as part of the diversity stage. And so basically when you are not mentioned, you are forgotten. If you are forgotten, you are not attended to. So we want to raise the level of awareness in terms of disability. Arjun is going to talk to us about how we might define diversity. Many people want to know what that is.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, Marquita. Well, folks, before I define disability, I'd like to elaborate a little bit on what Marquita said about being forgotten, being invisible. I was having, as a part-time business consultant, I was having a discussion with someone about the ride-sharing company Uber and how this person felt that that company missed the boat, as we like to say, on not catering very specifically and targeted way towards people with disabilities. If you think about it, who needs a car and driver service that's affordable more than somebody who can't drive themselves? And yet, they were missed. So other companies have come up, such as those in New York, for example, to fill in that gap. And so my friend or client, whatever you want to call him, he said, how could they miss that? Such a visible, it's right in front of your face. I said, no, that is not true. It is just as we said, that the disabled or people with disabilities, as we should call them, are invisible. So where we were, what is disability? Let's think about it. Disability, the lack of some particular competence or some particular ability as a result of our mental and physical faculties to perform everyday tasks. Now, what does this result in? This results in either visible or invisible changes in how we then interact with these people. Are these illnesses? No. Illness is not disability. What do you think, Marquita? How are they different?
People often want to make a distinction. Usually when a person has a disability, it's not something that's going to get better. We can't heal it. It's permanent. And illnesses, we theoretically feel like illnesses can be improved, they can be healed. And we don't want to think of people who may have differences in mental and emotional abilities as being sick. I get that a lot about my son who has muscular dystrophy. He's disabled, he's not sick.
Exactly. And folks, what can be so dangerous with the invisible forms of illnesses, or in this case disabilities, is that they go unnoticed or uncared for. A very common example in this certain scenario is that of what we today call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which so many of our men and women in uniform, our veterans, suffer from when they come back from tours of war. Many years ago, this used to be summarily dismissed. Oh, this person is just suffering from shell shock. Think about that word, shell shock. Shock is something that we experience and then we recover from. It is something that is temporary, something that is common, something that is normal. But now, with time, with care, with scientific input, what have we decided? We have understood that this is a trauma. We have understood that this is a disorder. We have understood that this is something that affects people in very deep and very long-lasting ways. And that is the basis of what we are talking about. With that in mind, Marquita, what do you think are some specific everyday issues that that we face as a society when it comes to understanding people with disabilities?
Well, of course, I would say the first thing, because we're communication scholars and we talk about words and how people talk, the first thing is labeling. How we label people. Unfortunately, not just with the disabled, but with all of us, we tend to want to bind people by the label that we put on them. So if we say a person is disabled, then we try to have expectations about what they can do, who they are, how they function, when the fact is that disability tells you nothing about that. The capabilities of the people vary in terms of high and low, or what the capabilities are. So when you hear that someone is labeled, we don't automatically want to stereotype them and think that we can know what they can do. And I dealt with that raising my son. I was always, it's a tricky thing and a guessy thing raising kids in the first place. But then when you have a disabled child, you're always trying to figure out, can he do that or can she do that? Should I be pushing, pulling, allowing him just to be? And I had to teach myself to get rid of the label and look at my child. What is it that I think his capabilities are? So labeling is an issue. A second issue is isolation. I found with my son as a single parent, we tended to be isolated. Let's take, for example, holidays and family gatherings. Who has disability access at their house? Most people don't. He's in a wheelchair, nobody could lift him, so we end up spending our holidays alone at my house because we couldn't get into anybody else's house. And of course, I could have said, okay, everybody come to my house, but then I've got to do all the cooking, the decorating, and take care of my son. So we were isolated. And even when we are in crowds and with people, we tend to be isolated because he's in a wheelchair, people don't talk to him. They'll come by and speak and say, hi, how you doing? But they don't have conversations with him. People tend to assume that that has nothing interesting to say. In fact, my very father never really had a conversation with my son until about 10 years ago. And my son is almost 40 years old because he assumed that he didn't have anything interesting to say. And I was able to ask my father about 10 years ago to spend Thanksgiving with my son because I had to go out of town. And when I got back, my dad was all excited. Oh, wow, we had a great time. Henry's a really interesting guy. We told jokes, we watched the games, and we had some beer. And he discovered that he was a human being. Exactly. He had something to say. And we missed that a lot. And then, of course, lastly, access. The problem of having access physically to be able to get in and out, which I talked about, but also access to information, access to everything that's available to the rest of us. And we still have a long way to go in America in terms of having access so that disabled people can get in and out of whatever it is they need to get in and out.
Absolutely.
Even the computer.
Yes, very good point.
Even the computer.
Folks, so much to talk about. I mean, you make such a good point, Marquita, about the two types of isolation. I just wanted to emphasize because they're so powerful. One was the physical isolation that people with a disability who are immobilized to some extent by their disability cannot interact normally with other members of society, even their own family and community. But then there's the other kind of isolation, which is where you are surrounded by people, but people do not know how to identify with you. And folks, this is because of something in our social, shall we say, wiring called the need for homophily. Homo meaning same, phily, interest, right? And so homophily requires us to see others like ourselves in some way, shape, or form, right? It is the basis of many kinds of discrimination, including racism, of course, which we've talked about in a previous episode. So to think about homophily for a minute. I see a person, I'm going to take a stereotypical example of a person in a wheelchair. The reason I take that is because that has become the icon, for disability,
yes.
Right? But as we now know, that's not the only kind, far from it.
Right.
But if I see someone in a wheelchair, what am I thinking? This person is a person who's in a wheelchair. That's because we first judge from the physical, the straightforward, superficial image that we are interacting with. The trouble is when we're interacting with someone that in their stature, because they're seated in a movable chair, right? When we're standing, maybe in a room, it's a networking or a cocktail party, whatever it might be, we don't know what is appropriate. We don't know, is it Is it offensive if I bend down and look at this person? Is it okay if I stand tall and then speak as if I'm a great person and you are not? There is this sense of social awkwardness that has crept into many of our, neighbors, friends, and family even, because they genuinely don't know what is the right way to interact. So maybe we can help folks with that.
Yes, very, very good point. And I like the new word you just taught me today, homophily. Yes, very good. I like to, when I see disabled people that are visibly disabled, I speak to them just the way that I speak to everyone else. Hello, how are you doing today? Or how's your day going? And wait for them to respond. And very often they'll have something to say about that, just like everybody else does. When we're talking to people in wheelchairs, if there's going to be a long conversation, a great thing is to see if you can sit. Get into a chair and sit somewhere near them so that they're not looking up. They spend their days looking up, and that can be stressful on the shoulders. But talking to them the way you talk to anyone else. And I developed these kinds of approaches because I taught special education as my first teaching job with no training in special ed. I had no idea what to do, and I went into a classroom where no teachers would go in it because the children were so out of control. And my first thought was, let me find out what is it that they want. And I walked into the classroom, established class, and I asked them to tell me, what is it that you want to learn about? These are high school students, 15 through 18. And somebody raised their hand. I want to find out how to get a girl to like me. Well, isn't that what all 15-year-old boys are thinking about? Yeah. Someone who was 17 said, I want to find out how to complete a job application. I want to find out how to do better in such and such a class. And I wrote those things down, and I thought, they sound pretty normal to me. So that's where we started from, and the class came to order because we were dealing with things that I asked them, what do you want to know? So I learned from there that disabled people have the same needs, wants, desires that everybody else has. And if you treat them like human beings, they will respond like human beings.
Absolutely. So well said. And another thing, folks, that comes up, and we can think of these in terms of different types of disabilities. For instance, perhaps someone who is visually impaired, right? And so they cannot see very well, but they can walk around, stand, move, talk, all those other faculties are available to them. And so, for instance, I remember a very clear image where I was at a college campus. I was still a student at the time, and there was this person who was asking me as a passerby to stop and give them directions. And now this is a visually impaired person.
Yes.
So I was very alert to being cautious in my choice of words. So here's what I did. I said, can I help you go to the building that you're trying to find?
Yes.
So I asked them, do you need my help?
Yes.
And they said, no, just tell me the rough direction. I said, oh, just go down the same direction you're facing, take a left, it'll be the first building on your right. And they thanked me, and they moved very competently down the road, very happy to move it and reach their destination. And I think that is something we can all think about. Just offer help, but do not assume that the person is helpless.
Yes.
I think that's the difference we have to make.
Right, and that's a very good point. Ask, can I help you? Do you need help? And don't do anything more than what the person asks you to do. Don't touch people. Don't grab their arms like we wouldn't do with anyone else, but ask if they need help. And don't be afraid to ask. Like my son sometimes, because he also mentally challenged, in his younger years would like to go somewhere by himself. He didn't want mom to go with him. But then maybe the county paratransit didn't show up at the right time. One time he was left in a mall, and he didn't ask anybody for help. And he was sitting there for hours, and nobody came to say, not even the mall security came to say, do you need help? And I was away from home. So don't be afraid to go ask someone if you need help. Not just because they look disabled, but if they just seem like they need help, ask them. It's important. Then we're not discriminating.
Very right. Well, Margita, we've covered so much today. We've talked about how we should, first of all, see them first as human beings, as fellow human beings, who have some different faculties than us, as many different people do. I wear glasses, some people don't.
Right.
We're all different, we're built differently. And so the second thing being, do not be afraid to offer help, but never, as so you well said, never see them as helpless or offer
Good,
more help
good.
than they actually need.
Good.
Then, of course, I think, could you talk of us, what can community members do? Speaking to your difficulties around the time of the holidays, what can community members do to help each other in those kinds of times?
I would say that what the community can do is really long-range planning. In building their homes, we need to think about what's called universal design. Universal design has to do with designing physical layout, the way we teach, the way our workplace is laid out, so that everybody can have access, not just the visibly disabled. So building your home so that everybody can get in the home. You don't know, disability comes without knowing. Nobody says, okay, somebody's going to become disabled in your family. So universal design is designing our homes and our workplaces and our educational settings so that everybody can use them, whether they have a visible disability or an invisible disability, and that would be help. And lastly, become advocates when there are issues going on in the community that have to do with disabled people. Pay attention to it, become an advocate, and vote for candidates who talk about a disability.
Absolutely, so well said. And my last 2 cents, folks, on that is, let's not think of this as some kind of favor that we're doing for
Right.
other people.
Right,
Let us
right.
see this as giving people what they already deserve. And so with that, folks, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Culture Chat. Catch us next time. And of course, don't forget to like our channel, subscribe, and hit the comments below to give us your thoughts. We're also on Twitter at Culture Chat Show. So join us next time for another Culture Chat.